From News 13, welcome to Political Connections.
And welcome to Political Connections, everybody. I'm Ybeth Bruzual. With the end of Florida's legislative session comes time for incumbents to start their re-election campaigns and challengers to get out and make the case for change in Tallahassee. One of those candidates looking to take over a seat in the Florida House is joining us now, Carlos Guillermo Smith. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Beth. I appreciate it.
Through the years, I've known you to be a behind-the-scenes guy mostly, okay? Familiar face with the local LGBT community and really across the state of Florida. Also working for Equality Florida and past chair of the Orange County Democrats. Now you've decided to throw your hat into the ring running for House District 49. Yeah. Why now?
Well, you know, now what happened is I've spent several years in the Florida legislature working with lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. You know, you correctly pointed out that I work for two former House members in the House of Representatives, and I got to learn a lot about public policy.
Joe Sanders and
for Joe Saunders and for Scott Randolph. And what I really learned during that time, in addition to the years that I spent organizing progressive activists at the grassroots level, was I learned what was really important to voters in Central Florida. I know that they care a lot about affordable health care, about affordable college education, about voting rights, about reproductive rights. And so, you know, I saw that we've had a lot of problems in Tallahassee, a lot of priorities that I think are really skewed, that don't really sync with what working families are thinking about. So I decided to throw my hat into the ring and run for office for the first time, and I'm really excited about it.
When it comes to redistricting, do you think any of the needs of the people within District 49 changed, or did it stay the same? If you could answer two of the top most pressing problems do you think exist in that district? Sure.
Well, I've been talking to a lot of voters, and House District 49 is in East Orange County. It's the UCF area. So what I've heard a lot is a lot of questions about affordable college education. For me, I graduated from UCF and I used the Bright Futures Scholarship to help pay for tuition. But what's happened is since 2009, the Florida legislature actually slashed the Bright Futures program in half. And what that had was it had a disproportionately negative impact on minority students. The first year after the cuts to Bright Futures, it was 47% of Latino students who were kicked out of the program, and another 62% of black freshmen were no longer qualified for the Bright Futures Scholarship. So
are you blaming, you're flat out blaming who exactly for those cuts in Tallahassee?
Well, the legislature, because they decided.
So the Republicans?
Yeah, well, the Republicans control the legislature, and they decided that the Bright Futures Scholarship wasn't important to them, which is why on day one, I'm ready to sponsor legislation that would put the funding for Bright Futures to pre-2009 levels, because I believe that there's no issue that is more important to creating economic opportunity for young people than access to affordable college education. That's really, really important to people in that district.
You're talking about people, you know, in the know, in the circles, call it, is for all intents and purposes, the UCF district, because it encompasses such a huge chunk of that part of Central Florida. Not talking about higher academia, but just, you know, high school, middle school, elementary school. I was looking at your website, and you have something, you have a quote on your campaign website. You say, Florida has an obsession with charter schools. What do you mean by that? Because a lot of parents, I don't know if you have kids or not, but who, you know, people who have children would say, you know what, I like to have options for my child who needs a little extra TLC, a special program that they may like. So why not have charter schools?
Well, here's what's happened. The trend that we've seen in the legislature over the last 15 years is a trend towards privatizing public schools and privatizing our public education system. When you look at the budget just this year that they're wrapping up this week in the Florida legislature, there's been only a 1% increase in per student funding, and that doesn't even cover the inflation compared to last year. But when you look very closely, you also see that the money that has been allotted for PICO funding, which is basically the construction of buildings, there's only 650 charter schools in Florida compared to 3,600 traditional public schools, and yet they are allotting the charter schools $90 million in taxpayer money while only giving the traditional public schools $50 million. That's a problem. And what it does is it forces the local school districts to raise property taxes so that they can get the necessary funds that they need to fix deteriorating traditional public schools. And what it does is it's a slow drip, drip, drip that bleeds money out of the public school system into unaccountable for-profit charter schools, which, by the way, have no consistent record that shows that there are any meaningful learning gains happening with students in those for-profit charter schools.
Would you say yes to more oversight for those who are doing well?
Absolutely, absolutely. And what we really need to make sure is happening is not only that there is a very rigorous and strict application system for these charter schools. Right now there's very little oversight. It's very easy for them to get a contract or charter approved immediately, either by the local school board or by Tallahassee, which has become a rubber stamp. And what that has caused is we've seen several charter schools, many all over Orlando, that close unexpectedly.
And we've done many stories on some
They close unexpectedly, and they pay severance packages, sometimes that are six figures, to the principals of a failing for-profit charter school. It's
but
just
there
not good.
are others that do very well.
Sure.
Let me ask you your opinion on the reliance of high-stakes testing and using multiple measures to effectively evaluate student and teacher performance. That's also a very interesting topic that you have a lot to say about.
Yeah, I do. You know, when you look at actually just a few weeks ago, we saw the performance and the grading that came out for Orange County school teachers, and they were really upset because we saw this year that only 3% of teachers in Orange County were ranked highly effective. Well, just last year, over 80% of Orange County teachers were ranked highly effective. What that tells us is that there is something wrong with the teacher and school evaluation system, and it's not the students or the teachers.
You've been endorsed by Kat Gordon and other high-profile elected officials across Central Florida, Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer, Scott Randolph, and some other folks. Is that, do you think, a kiss of death or a seal of approval? Because in years past, we've seen other people, Republican or Democrat,
Sure.
who you looked and thought, man, they're being endorsed by all the big dogs, and then they lost. Do you worry about that anytime?
I don't, and you know what we have is we have a lot of endorsements from community leaders as well. A lot of people who live in the district, who know my body of work in advocating for our community, who have stepped up as just everyday residents who have endorsed my campaign. But Ybeth, what's really important is it's also an indication and a validation of how well I work with other people in the process. You know, one of the endorsements I was most proud of is actually 14 House Democrats endorsed me in my campaign, which is an indication that they know that I can work very well in the process, that I'm really effective, and I know how to get things done, and that's why they were eager to support my campaign, and I'm really honored to have their support.
I'm going through the list of things that I want to talk to you about. One of the things that I saw on your social media, Senate Bill 318 was voted down 10-9 by the Senate Committee Appropriations, but bill was kept alive, motion for consideration, et cetera, et cetera. The bill sponsors Senator Garrett Richter, a Naples Republican, told the committee that when oil prices go back up, we're talking about fracking,
Sure.
will resume in Florida, but without the regulation provided in his bill. You said on Facebook, actually, no, with a capital N-O, your bill just sucks, bro. My question to you, Mr. Smith, is, I mean, what about this fracking bill did you not like?
Well, here's the problem with fracking. The problem is that Florida is a very unique environment where we have very delicate estuaries underneath the basin, you know, where the water comes from. And what we've seen in other states is fracking has been very dangerous. It has had a poisoning effect on the drinking water in other states. There have been accidents that have been unregulated. And what Senator Richter actually misrepresented about the bill is he told people, he said, hey, listen, if you don't support fracking, then you should support this bill because it brings all kinds of new rules and regulations. But the reality is that the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, the DEP, is a rubber stamp. They are all Rick Scott appointees who would basically fast track all of these applications to allow fracking. And what we have to do is we have to look at what the values are of our local community. Orange County government recently passed a resolution to ban fracking fracking in Orange County, and they're not the only one. There have been municipalities and cities across Florida that cover a majority of this state who have also sent the same message. So the fact that this bill has even come up, which preempts all of those decisions by local governments, is another example of how Tallahassee is just not listening.
We don't have a lot of time, but I want to ask you about reproductive rights in the state of Florida. You said that they're under attack, and you have been very clear to put together in tandem when it comes to gay rights, but also reproductive rights. Explain to me your version of why somehow they're connected.
Well, I think that that reproductive rights and LGBT equal rights are at an intersection because we have a lot of shared enemies. There's a lot of different legal underpinnings, and what we've seen the recent trend has been is that there's a far right agenda to impose traditional definitions of marriage, of sexuality, and of reproductive function onto other people. And what we have seen most recently is they're using religious freedom to try to impose that extreme agenda. They did it with Hobby Lobby, where they made a decision. They used religious freedom to say that Hobby Lobby didn't have to give birth control because they had a religious objection. Most recently this session, they're using religious freedom to try to chip away at LGBT equal rights. So it's a trend, it's a disturbing trend, but we stand together in support of reproductive rights.
So that's the connection. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Democrat Carlos Guillermo Smith, running for Florida House District 49.
Thank you for having me, Ybeth.
You'll come back on the show?
Absolutely.
Okay.